Now, I'd like to know from you, what really is your role in Montserrat as governor, other than the constitutional roles whereby you're in charge of the defense and the public sector and so on. What's your role? And what's your responsibility? And that's the answer I'm looking for, to the people of Montserrat.
I think you just said it yourself. There is nothing outside of the Constitution. Would you expect me to take a role outside of my responsibility as set out in the Constitution?
Indeed. You sit as chairman, president of
the
cabinet.
Yes.
And there are things that cabinet ought to do or not do, which you seem to know nothing about.
I know everything
Regularly.
the cabinet does.
What they do, but what about the other things that you should take up based on the things that they're telling you that they should have done? And I'm referring, on all of this, I'm really hitting at the whole MDC situation. Address us on that.
Well, I think we've already discussed this in previous press conferences. Insofar as anything came to cabinet about MDC, it was the only thing with the previous government was some policy about demarcation of land. Right,
yes, exactly.
After the new government came in, they made the decision, almost as soon as they came in, to replace the board. It took a couple of months for them to line up the people they wanted to take over, as indeed is their right, and that came to cabinet. Otherwise, as again, just to refer to my statement or the background, MDC is a wholly owned company of the government of Montserrat.
Of which the government cabinet is the sole shareholder.
The government of Montserrat, not the cabinet particularly.
Your Excellency, please.
No, not
semantics, please.
I'm not. It's not semantics.
The cabinet is the supreme body of the elected people.
And they delegated that to the MDC board.
Your Excellency, no. Clearly, again, there's some. I have in front of me here some bylaws. But let me fast forward. So we got a report. What does that report say to you now?
Which report? The task force report.
The task force report. What does it say to you about what you ought to have known and what should have come to cabinet?
I don't know what should have come to cabinet. What comes to cabinet, unless
are you saying, Your Excellency, that you have read this report?
Can I answer your question first, please? What should have come to cabinet is something that the previous government and the new government should have brought if they felt necessary. The only things that I, of my own cognizance, bring to cabinet is about the public service and appointments with it, financial services, and anything to do with defence. Otherwise, the running of economic policy in this country, and I think you would be very surprised if it wasn't so, is entirely devolved to your elected government. It would not be appropriate for me to be involved in economic policy. As stuff comes to cabinet, I have a voice in the formulation of that economic policy and have an opinion, which I give. But it is up to the government to decide what it wants to do.
Did you have an opinion on the fact that our highest paid person in Montserrat, probably, don't know what you were paid, did not pay, well, I know you pay tax to the British government and you probably pay tax in Montserrat, but you pay taxes someplace. Doesn't it concern you that anyone in Montserrat leaves this country receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars and did not pay a penny of tax?
Well, I'm glad you don't accuse me of having a Swiss bank account, but
maybe you do, Your Excellency. You can tell us if you do or not.
No, that would be confidential information.
Exactly, so why would I accuse you?
I did not know the details of the previous CEO's pay package.
And precisely.
I didn't know his contract.
That was a decision that should have been made where? In cabinet. So we'll move forward. You didn't know about it.
No, I didn't.
Martin, what is DFID's role and responsibility? You just mentioned a while ago something about oversight. So one of the concerns, take for example the whole problem with this spending at MDC and so on. A DFID member was always on board, on the various boards. What really ought to have been his role? You talk about oversight. What does that entail?
Well, the role of the DFID representative on the MDC board was as observer status, as it's called. So it's purely there as an observer.
And as observer, does he report to his superiors?
Well, it's part of, yes, of course. I mean, I respond, or I report directly to the deputy director of DFID's Overseas Territories Department. So he would have also been required to do the same.
I do hope Jivan is listening, because I'm sure he has some follow-up questions on these lead questions I'm asking. Yes, okay. There was a report that was issued and was boasted upon by the CEO of thing. You told us in this press in here that that report was not. What's the term? Was not.
It was never approved.
It was not approved.
No.
And so things that were said by one party and other things that were said, should we not? Whenever I refer to it, I usually say that you've said that it wasn't approved, etc., etc. But it's been used against, I would say, some of the things that you folks have had in your task force report.
Yes. Well, that report wasn't approved. Obviously, the process of the annual review that took place last summer involved a number of team members from the MDC, including the CEO. So he would have had a draft of the report, as it was still in draft at that time. In July, it was not approved because of concerns that were then raised in August, September. That obviously thought, well, that annual review, there seems to be some other issues here. So informally, it does not exist. It's not been approved by DFID as an annual review of the MDC.
And sorry, just to confirm, when the CEO released part of that report, he did so actually against DFID's wishes. We did not agree, or it was not agreed that he should release that report.
But he still left Montserrat as a darling and a golden boy, as against others who have been disenfranchised, who were eventually terminated, people who did no wrong, and people who in fact, and I want you to comment on that, both of you, who in fact did good for Montserrat and through the MDC. They were disenfranchised in different ways.
I think it would not be appropriate for either Martin or I to answer that question, if it is a question.
Why
Seems
is that?
like more of a comment.
Why
Well,
is that?
because as we all know, there is at least one set of proceedings going through the court, and anything we may or may not say in relation to that could be used, and therefore it would be entirely inappropriate for us to make any comments.
Expected answer, but just so I raised it.